Hello everyone, welcome back to Review and Rate. Today, we're entering into a world of zombie outbreaks and powerful creatures. That's right, we're going to run away from that ugly creature and keep reviving its attacks to talk about Resident Evil 3 Remake, a game developed by Capcom and released in 2020. If you're a fan of survivor horror action, exceptional graphics and challenging boss battles, you won't want to miss this review. Now, let's go face that creature and get ready to enter the world of RE3 Remake. RE3 Remake provides great gameplay and mechanics that could have been much better if the game didn't have some mistakes. The remake in general is much better than the original in my opinion. I will have to admit that I haven't played the original because of my frustrated parts in my review of RE Remake and Zero. However, I have read enough to know that the original Resident Evil 3 game has better parts than the remake, like being a longer game overall, and Nemesis being much scarier and better there. But I still think the remake is better because, like I talked about in my review of RE Remake and Zero, I didn't like the fixed camera and the requirement of the player to use ink ribbons to save. So given that the remake has neither of those things, I can say for certain that the remake is way more fun despite its flaws, which I will talk about now. So talking about the problems with the remake compared to the original, RE3 Remake is shorter. Based on what I know, they cut levels, which is a very bad idea. Usually in remakes, they remove some parts of the original game, but absolutely not like this, which is taking out levels that would have been great to see in the remake. They even added RE Resistance, a multiplayer game, to have it as a substitute for a longer RE3 Remake game. Why? Regardless of whether RE Resistance is good or not, you don't just create a game that no one wants, instead of actually creating a long game that everyone will be satisfied with. A lot of great things could have come out of these removed levels, so it is a shame to not have them remade, but whatever. On the other hand, here is where I get to the improvements over the original. First, no more fixed camera angles. The remake is played in third person over the shoulder, which I very much prefer for Resident Evil games. There are good things that come out from this type of camera, like having the ability to look directly at where you are moving. Also can aim and shoot at enemies easily. Killing enemies wasn't very fun in RE Remake and Zero, but now with over the shoulder camera, I can say that killing enemies is one of the best things about the game. Other thing I want to add here is maybe this is just me, but horror is better in over the shoulder camera. Many people will probably disagree with me on this, because RE Remake for example is scary but with fixed camera, and I can understand that. I certainly did like the horror elements in RE Remake, but I still think over the shoulder is the right choice for RE games. Like imagine RE Remake is in over the shoulder. Wouldn't it be scarier? In my opinion it is, and I appreciate it being this way right now. Second and final improvement would be saving. The game autosaves as you progress through the game, except on Inferno difficulty, which makes sense given that this difficulty is the hardest one and gives more challenge to the player. In addition, manual saving is easy as it doesn't require a limited object like the ink ribbons to save. All you have to do is find a typewriter in a safe room and save, which is easy, unless you don't want to save too much so your rank will be higher. This is what I like about RE3 Remake, that made the game much more fun and doesn't waste your time on something you don't need. But anyways, let's continue. There are actually 5 different difficulty settings, each one explaining what the type of difficulty is, so you can test your challenge on each of them. RE3 Remake is a survivor horror game, but it certainly has many action elements. I actually don't mind that at all. I like combining the two together, but at the same time the action scenes make it less terrifying, and takes away the horror background with it. This game also relies more on progressing than backtracking, which could be weird for a survivor horror or even a Resident Evil game. There are of course certain moments when you backtrack, but even those backtracking times, you still are kind of progressing, which makes the game faster, which is good, but also gives you less time to explore. Exploring, like usual with Resident Evil games, is very fun, where you have a map that tells you about the places you haven't gotten everything from, so you can maybe go there later, look for the object, and pick it up so you can store it in your inventory. Speaking about inventory, when you are in a safe room, you will find a box which can store an infinite amount of items there, so you can use them later, just like what I talked about in my review of RE Remake. Items you find come in varying types. There are the green and red herbs only in this game, which as we know when you combine these two, you get a full healing herb that's best used when your health is in danger. Strangely, there are no blue herbs. The only time you get poisoned is from enemy spiders, and even that gets healed with a green herb. I can say that this doesn't make sense, but I can understand that herbs in general heal a player from something, so nothing wrong here. Notes can also be found anywhere. They give further details about different sections of the story, which is what encourages me to search for them. And thankfully they don't take any space in your inventory. If you want to increase your inventory space, be sure to look for pockets that adds 2 extra spaces when you get one. If there is an item that you don't need anymore, the game lets you throw it away, giving you more space to put other things there, which is always great to have in Resident Evil games. Ammo is scarce in RE3 Remake, especially in harder difficulties. Every time I see a place on the map that I haven't fully explored, I make sure to get there and find ammo. There are a lot of enemies roaming around, especially when you get to the boss, so it's very likely that the player would run out, so finding them makes exploring very important. Crafting different items gets you more types of ammo for any different weapon, so sometimes you will find items you think you don't need, but then it turns out that they are used for more ammo, which is great. Exploring is always fun in Resident Evil games, and here it is no different. Loading screens gives details about where you are in the story when you exit out of the game and then come back. This makes sure that the player is on the right track and doesn't forget where they were in the game. The game in general consists of gameplay and cutscenes. Despite the game being short, I think the levels are pretty good, where each of them display different locations and funny enemies to fight, so the game doesn't feel repetitive at all. Puzzles are okay, nothing too hard or too easy in my opinion, and they are fun to solve in their own ways, like getting the train station working and opening safe locks. You play with 2 characters in this game. One is Jill, the one you play with the most obviously, and the other is Carlos. Each of them has their own ability. For example, Jill can dodge attacks, while Carlos does a shoulder charge. If you ask me, I barely use Carlos' ability because it's mostly useless, while Jill's ability in my opinion is a better one, as I keep dodging enemy attacks most of the time, especially when being chased down by Nemesis. Also, Jill gets weapons like a shotgun, grenade launcher, and a lightning hawk, in addition to the lockpick and bolt cutter, while Carlos only gets the assault rifle and keycards, so you can tell from this that Jill has better equipment. The one thing you can appreciate about the Resident Evil games is the death animations. Like instead of instantly getting killed, the game shows you different ones depending on the enemy, which sometimes encourages players to die in the game just to watch it. Pretty cool. In order to kill enemies, RE3 Remake offers a reasonable number of weapons. There's the handgun and the other weapons I mentioned before, along with the great attachments. You also get side weapons like flash and hand grenades, along with an unlimited use of a melee weapon like the knife, which is very useful in case you run out of ammo. Finally, I think that each enemy you fight is great, especially the boss, but there should have been more in my opinion. Enemy variety is very short that I can even remember them all, and there are even no number of bosses, only just one evolving boss, which is the Nemesis. But nonetheless, I like these enemies, and I think what makes it more fun is shooting through their weak points that you have to get creative to kill an enemy faster. For example, shooting a zombie in the head doesn't get the headshot until you actually shoot them in the right spot, I think, which I don't know where it is exactly, but I get lucky sometimes. If you don't get a headshot from a zombie, then you will be unsure if it's really dead until you actually shoot it more and it doesn't move. Now, let's talk about the boss in this game, which is Nemesis. This might be unpopular, but I think he is a great enemy and certainly a great evolving boss. I thought the Nemesis chasing sections of the game are pretty great and frightening at times, especially in harder difficulties. Take away the nonsense story elements of it, which I will talk about in the story part of the review, and you will get in return a powerful enemy that is fun to avoid and run away from. A great little detail in this game is that if you haven't noticed, you can actually get the nemesis down when you take enough damage from him, and you actually get rewarded for that. It's a great little secret that I haven't noticed at all, until one time I was trying to shoot at him for fun, and was surprised by this. He eventually does get up after a period of time, depending on the difficulty, buying you some time to quickly run away from him before he gets back at you. Last thing I want to say about Nemesis is that in the cutscene chasing sections, if you don't act fast, he kills you, so you have to keep yourself focused on those scenes, which I really liked because it keeps the player's attention on the game, instead of them just watching. Just a nice little thing I wanted to explain. But now, since all that is finished, let's talk about the story. RE3 Remake has a good story, but it's filled with some silly events. My main problem with the story is Jill's plot armor. I just want to say that I don't have a problem with plot armor generally for main characters and stories. In addition, when a game for example tells a story about a certain main character, it is normal for the writer to make sure that character doesn't get killed, or else the story is pointless. So I can understand why that happens, and I have no problem with it at all, especially in Resident Evil games, where a lot of characters died due to them fighting dangerous creatures. But what I will have a problem with is when it's very noticeable and repetitive, that eventually becomes boring and silly. Just take a look at what I mean.
Goodbye, Miss Valentine. Shame you didn't listen to me when you had the chance.
See how it happens too many times? And the other problem is that all side characters get killed, while Jill and Carlos, the main characters, always survive, even when main characters face the same incidents as the main ones. Please, have a look and tell me that's not weird and noticeable. It is things like this where nothing makes sense anymore. In addition, Nemesis is considered in this game to be this powerful creature who can crush people he sees as enemies with just one of his dangerous moves. So how does Jill always run away from him? Look, I think Nemesis scenes are great at times, and he does some great things here and there, but the problem is that he seems weak when he always let the main characters go. You don't always have to make Nemesis chase Jill, then she survives somehow. Just make his appearance mysterious and surprising, so you don't have to show him every single time. But anyways, not everything is bad. There are certainly great things. One of them is that Jill and Carlos are both great characters. It was fun to watch them both interact with each other, and their stories with other characters. And of course, the story itself. Let's summarize. The story takes place in 1998, after the mentioned incident that occurred in Resident Evil 1. Umbrella unleashes one of their projects called Nemesis. Nemesis' assignment was to eliminate All-Star's members. One of those members include Jill, of course. Jill Valentine resides in her apartment inside Raccoon City, after escaping the horror of the mansion and Umbrella's projects, only to get attacked by Nemesis, who goes chasing after her. She then witnesses the zombie outbreak of Raccoon City unfold as she is getting away from the creature, until a person named Carlos from UBCS rescues her. She first had conflicting problems with Carlos and his friends because they work with Umbrella, the same company she knows caused all the problems, but after that she realizes that they have no knowledge of any of that, and they just came to rescue people and help them escape the city, so she eventually helps them. She fights Nemesis, then gets the train working, leaving Carlos behind, only to be attacked again by that creature, and it is revealed that one of the people she was with actually tricked them. This man is called Nikolai. On her way to the top, she defeats an evolved Nemesis, only for it to stab her with some kind of infection. Later, Carlos sees her laying on the ground. Worried, he gets her to the hospital and finds a cure in one of the Umbrella's labs. Jill then gets up and eventually arrives at one of the Umbrella's research facilities, where she gets some kind of vaccine. She gets attacked once again by Nemesis. One fight leads to the other with help from Carlos, until she finally defeats Nemesis completely in his last evolving phase. She then goes to the top, and ends up having a showdown with Nikolai, who destroys the vaccine, but eventually Jill and Carlos defeat him, and leave him for dead in Raccoon City, as they both escape in a helicopter. In the end, the government launches a missile into the city, as Jill and Carlos watch it get destroyed and erased completely. Despite the silliness, it was great to know the story on what happened to Raccoon City, from the outbreak to destroying the city at the end. And this is what I at least appreciate from a story like this. So since we have finished with the story, let's switch our focus to the graphics. RE3 Remake is exceptional in its graphics, especially comparing it to the original. Resident Evil games always excels at fitting the horror theme look, and in this game it's no different, as you can see different locations filled with either the dark creepy look in the city, or an overrun hospital and lab filled with terrifying creatures. Just look at these zombies, and notice the detail put in them, especially the zombies turning normal humans into flesh-eating monsters. While people may argue that Nemesis looks way more terrifying in the old RE3 game, I can surely disagree, because I think the detail of his look in the remake gives more picture of who he really is and how he was created. Not only did the remake improve the enemies' looks from the original, but also the levels, and the cutscenes playing like a movie. It's all great stuff to just look at and notice the different improvements. And finally, the characters look amazing. Whether you just compare them with the original, or just take a look at their models, you will notice the great details that was put in them to make the characters look real and display human emotions. Now that we are done with looking at the amazing visuals, let's hop into the sound. RE3 Remake offers great sound design that gives you a combination of horror and action. The game brilliantly displays environmental sounds which fit with the kind of level you are playing in. Here are some examples. The weapons give you realistic sounds as what you expect to hear from each of these weapons. And of course the enemies' sounds which shows unique terrifying voices upon hearing them. Add to that Nemesis and his different voices when evolving. Also, the voice acting in this game is just as great, where characters get into normal human conversations between each other.
This isn't the last ride out of town, right?
Do not worry. Once the civilians are safe, the train will be back.
It's alright, you go on ahead. I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
Okay.
You need to find this scientist.
Finally, the different soundtracks that occur either in creepy places like here, or when there is action like Jill's scenes with the Nemesis. And most important of them all is the ending soundtrack, as it makes you feel emotional when ending the story. Just listen to this spectacular soundtrack. Now, let's finish off with the replayability. Despite the short game, RE3 Remake has many options for replayability. First, whatever difficulty you played with on your first time, just try the harder one, then the harder, until you end it with the Inferno, because the game gets more challenging and fun as it gets more difficult. Second, try unlocking concept art and models. When you achieve different challenges, it will be worth it to look at them and how the creators displayed those detailed visuals, which I talked about in my graphics part of the review. And when you complete these challenges, you get some kind of points which you can spend them on very amazing stuff. In addition, you can spend these points on things like more pockets, some kind of ability coins, increased crafting ammo, perfect dodge, etc. And the most outstanding of them all are the weapons, like hot dagger knife that burn enemies, Raiden, which kills enemies instantly if you aim at them correctly, infinite ammo for the handgun and assault rifle, and an infinite rocket launcher. Just imagine replaying the game with all these weapons. It would be amazing and very fun. Finally, you can play Resident Evil Resistance, which is fun to play at times. I like that you can play with either the Mastermind, where you put traps to other players and stop them until the time runs out, or be one of the survivors who fight against enemies and avoid the traps until you reach the end and escape. But the problem is that RE Resistance has connection problems, and many of the times it doesn't feel fair to the players. So we'll play it for a little while, then get tired of it pretty quickly. Let's now conclude and summarize my overall impression of the game. RE3 Remake offers great gameplay, a good story, exceptional graphics, great sound design, and very good replayability that makes me appreciate Capcom remaking an old game and turning it into this wonderful game. While there are many problems with how many things were cut from the original game to make it short, adding a multiplayer game for no reason, and a lot of silly scenes in the story with the Nemesis, these problems don't affect the game too much because RE3 Remake is very fun and looks amazing. So, here is the final score. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more insightful review videos. Feel free to share your thoughts on whether the points I've raised resonate with you or if you have a different perspective. And leave your suggestions in the comments about which game you'd like to see reviewed next. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you all for watching.